The maritime industry is responsible for the movement of more than 80% of world trade, making it one of the world's most important. And when it comes to Southampton, we boast a thriving maritime economy, which contributes a whopping $2.5 billion to the UK economy in a typical year. But, like most industries, it's facing major challenges. Welcome back to Explained, the Southampton Solent University podcast where we attempt to unpack what's going on behind the scenes of modern life. It's season 2, and we're back to discuss everything from sport and science to music and law and all things in between. I'm your host, Robyn O'Marney, and in this episode, we're celebrating World Maritime Day by diving into this year's theme, our ocean, our obligation, and our opportunity. Today, I'm joined by Senior Lecturer in Ship Handling at Southampton Solent University's Warsash Maritime School, Martin Greenslade. Martin heads up our Ship Handling Centre, a world-leading training facility for pilots and captains set on the beautiful Timsbury Lake. Before he joined us in 2023, Martin spent more than 30 years in the maritime industry as both a deck officer and marine pilot. Welcome, Martin.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, I want to kick off by knowing a bit about you. So, the maritime industry reaches very far back. According to Google, as far back as 1500 BC. There have, of course, been a few advances since then. But obviously the fundamental goal remains the same. I'd love to know a bit about what attracted you, Martin, to a career at sea.
Okay, well, I was a sort of 16-year-old looking out the window, not going anywhere. And mid-80s, I think it was 1984, I was just taking my O-levels, and I didn't really have any sense of direction. So my dad actually took me to a career open day, a bit similar to what we have here in Warsash, and got talking to some of the cadets who had just come back from Australia, New Zealand, the Far East. And it gave me a sort of flicker of a motivation and a sense of direction. And they explained how the career pathway was. And from that point on, really, I was very determined to follow that path.
And when you say about those places that those people had been, have you now been to all of those places?
I have. Over my 40 years, I've probably touched most coastal places in the world. There isn't many places on the map that I haven't stuck a pin in.
And was that a really big draw for you, that idea of being able to travel?
I think it is. I think it's something as a young person. I think people find travel, an inspirational thing to do. And I think in the 80s it was a little bit more adventurous now because most people travel much more widely now than they ever did.
And in terms of changes and advances, from when your career started, let's say, to now, what kind of changes did you see during that time?
Well, in the 80s, when I was training, I was probably there at the wrong time, really, because the Merchant Navy had stalled, the training had stalled. In fact, when I got my cadetship on phase 1 at the School of Navigation in Warsash, there was only 6 people in the room. Training had pretty much stopped and stalled. I was lucky enough to get one of those berths, and I spent my cadetship with P&O as a group cadet. And the industry then was what I would call a pretty traditional industry. Paper charts, sextants, would you believe? I know I wasn't in the 1500s, but even though I look that old, but I certainly was a very traditional industry, and limited communication with home. Whereas now, if you go on a bridge of a ship, much more what people would think as an aircraft cockpit style, integrated bridges, systems, automation, digitization. And if you go away to sea now, you're very connected. You can speak to your families every day. Starlink, internet is accessible. I used to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks before I got an airmail. So advances have changed not only in how people live on board, but in terms of how ships operate.
And how do you think, just from your perspective at least, how do people react to those changes when they were happening? Were people quite open to it, or was there a bit of hesitation to, digitise things?
I think there was. I think the senior personnel on board, the masters and some of the senior chief officers, when I was coming through an age where technology and digitization was moving quickly, and I was probably a little bit more open to it. I do remember when GPS navigation came in, and some of the senior captains would cover the actual position on the GPS to go back to taking star sights in the morning and noon positions. However, I do embrace that now because you do learn a lot of the traditional concepts.
And do people still have those skills?
I think the skills are there still. I'm sure it's moved on from when I was a cadet in learning the principles of navigation. I do hope that they still cover that in the programs. I'm more involved in training what you call senior maritime professionals now, not so much involved in the cadets programs. I think it's essential. I really would. I thought, it's the groundwork of where we are now. So,
and obviously at Timsbury Lake, which is a really fantastic facility, which I got to visit recently. Thank you, Martin. I had a great time. I was like, I'm going to come and work here now. But obviously, that's a lot about continued professional development, otherwise known as CPD. And I guess what I'm interested to know is in your own career, as you developed, did you feel that a sense of, because we're going to come on to kind of the environment and climate change, because we have to if we're talking about this industry. Sure. There's a big sense of we need to do something. Do you feel like there was an awareness of what was happening to the environment and how the industry played a part in that as you developed, or not so much?
In the early days, no, I would say not. I lived through the implementation from what we call the MARPOL regulations. The maritime industry is sometimes what I would term as quite a reactive industry. Even though the MARPOL regulations, marine pollution regulations, were ahead of its time in the 1970s, it took a couple of incidents for them to really aggressively implement. But what's good to see now is that there is an ambitious target to move from what we call reducing the emissions on ships to decarbonisation and total net-free, carbon-free sort of fueled ships. So the room for innovation is incredible and fast-paced now.
And we'll come on to that a little bit later. So I just want to say that obviously we're doing this episode because it was World Maritime Day recently, and this year's theme is Our Ocean, Our Obligation and Our Opportunity. So it does shine a spotlight on some of the threats that the world's waterways are facing. Can you tell us what some of those might be? Some of the threats?
I can touch upon those threats. Climate change, I would say, is one. And I know as a seafarer, even though I'd left the sea, ocean-going perspective, the evidence is there. I know there's some world leaders who will deny the science, but when you're a seafarer, you do feel and see the evidence that climate change affects, with shifting weather patterns, different routes forming from the ice shrinking in the Arctic, to all sorts of sort of rising sea levels and coastal implications, closure of some inland waterways due to the waters rising. The evidence is clear.
Yeah, it can't be avoided.
It can't be avoided, no.
So how might, and obviously, this is just, again, from your perspective, but how might these challenges change the industry? Well,
I think innovation. I think people are more aware. They have to be more aware. Cleaner fuels is one. Cutting emissions is one thing but you've got different alternative fuels now on ships. Ship design is changing. You're seeing more larger ships, more complex ships, but more efficient in terms of the environment. We're moving from heavy fuel oil, which is a dirty oil, to ammonia, hydrogen, and LNG is very much in force now. A lot of the vessels now are bunkering with LNG and using cleaner fuels.
Okay. And in terms of, you were saying, the industry's been quite reactive. Is this an opportunity actually for them to be proactive? and to tackle these challenges head on rather than waiting?
It has to be to keep with the pace of what the ambitious targets are. I think now an example is some of the cargo owners, and I'm talking about the big cargo owners like Amazon and IKEA, are very much attuned with sustainability, and they put pressure on for the ship owners, the people who build the ships, to invest in these new designs and use these alternative fuels and technologies, digitization, automation, to make it more sustainable. So yes, the environment drives everything in terms of shipping now.
So our ocean then, so when we talk about our oceans, you've got the leisure travel, so you've got your cruises, and then on one side you've got the movement of goods and trade. Kind of how large is the scope of the maritime industry? I mean, you said you've been all over the world, so, you know, it's a lot of ground to cover, or a lot of water to cover.
Well, having lived in it, I realise how vast the industry is, the global waterways and shipping is. It connects the world. 90% of trade and cargo is flowed through, is taken by ships. But it's
90%?
90%. So it's almost invisible to the public. They don't really realise that and any disruptions to shipping can have a direct effect to that consumer. But when things are running normally, people don't realise the vast scope of the maritime industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you say about the kind of invisible nature of it, because people don't really think about it unless there's something in the news, say some of the geopolitical issues that are facing, you know, for example, the Suez and Panama canals. And so you've kind of got that kind of conflict, and then you've got the shrinking of Arctic ice and that kind of thing. I mean, do you think these risks will continue to be quite prevalent in the industry, and how can the industry mitigate them? I mean, I guess in some instances it's out of their control, but so it's finding a way to kind of adapt, maybe. Yeah,
and you talk about disruption. There was an incident in 2021 with the Ever Given. It's a classic example of something which affects the consumer. 6 days blocking a choke point, as we call them, as the Suez Canal is. A lot of trade through there. £6 billion of disruption. But how did the consumer see it? Well, they saw it with essential items not on the shelves, the supply chain disrupted, Christmas presents not arriving. That's a prime example of these disruptions to the choke points and stress environments that can have an effect on us all.
Do we expect more of these challenges? Because I mean, I don't want to go all political, but there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I guess that does quite significantly impact the movement of trade.
You're right there, and there's an example of how fragile the food supply chain is with shipping in terms of the Black Sea and the geopolitical situation there is there. The grain exports affected. So geopolitical competition for resources has always been an issue, but now so with a global collaboration, which is required to head onto these challenges. It doesn't take more than things like in the Black Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, South China Sea, to disrupt the status quo.
You talk about, you know, working collaboratively on that big global scale. Where does the obligation to protect the environment, for example, sit when it comes to the maritime industry? I mean, is it everyone that works, or is it a bit more granular than that?
I think it's a good question, because I think it's a chain. Effectively, the chain will only work if each stakeholder does their bit. What I mean by that, you've got the global framework. Because it's so vast, you have to have somebody who collaborates globally and sets the framework, and that being IMO, International Maritime Organization. And then that goes down into the regional bodies, whereas the European regional body very forward thinking. Sometimes their regulations are higher than the global framework, and that drives policy. But you've also got the ship owners. They are the ones who invest in new ship designs, new technologies, and new fuels. That's driven by, as I said, the cargo owners. You've got the training centres, as we are one. Warsash Maritime is a world-leading training centre. We have a responsibility to make the seafarers more aware of the environment, and that's something that I believe in. That we need a more holistic approach to professional development in terms of training. There's very much emphasis on technical, but I feel there's a holistic approach to training modern day maritime professionals. It's very important, and the consumer has too, because everything that you buy has a shipping footprint, and you don't realise that. But we all want it. We all want it now, don't we? We all want it tomorrow, but that comes at a price. So a little bit more forethought in where you buy, what you buy, and again, if one of these elements doesn't do their bit, then the chain breaks and progress will be slow.
So it's actually very delicate and complex. And do you think there's, like you said, the responsibility is with the consumer as well? Because we think about the items that we want, the things that we're used to having. We actually can't necessarily have those things if, for example, avocados, we're not growing them here in the UK. They need to come from quite far away. So there's this kind of want from the consumer that's being met by the industry, which is transporting those goods.
I think, to be quite honest with you, it's so accessible in shops that you sometimes don't realise where they come from and how they're transported.
Yeah.
I don't think, people have got busy lives, I guess, but to educate people, I think there'll always be a want and a need for these products, and there is a responsibility to move the trade to and fro. But as we mentioned, choke points and stress environments, it's the industry is committed to moving these in a green, in a more smarter way. So smarter shipping is a sort of key phrase now, in terms of it's not just about moving cargo efficiently, it's about moving it responsibly. And regulatory compliance from governments, from IMO, is pushing, and it is very proactive towards that.
How does the industry react when something like a crisis happens?
The maritime industry, I did say that it was a reactionary industry. That probably doesn't serve too much justice in that. It's got an excellent framework for learning, so we learn quick. For example, an incident such as the Ever Given, the accident investigation is up there with the aviation industry. So there's always a learning. Every day is a school day. But you can never remove the risk of these things happening. Training, of which is part of what my perspective is now as a maritime educator. Training is essential. Continuous professional development are the key words now throughout, not just maritime industry. And a drive for continuous, consistent professional development, especially in carrying trade and ship masters, chief officers, junior officers, and maritime pilots is something that I want to help shape going forward.
And I think that's actually something that's quite wonderful about the maritime industry, that there is that sense of continuous development. You don't actually get that in every single industry or sector. And I think the fact that there is this emphasis on we're going to continue to do better, to develop, is really important. And especially when it comes to meeting the challenges that are here now, but also might be here in the future. Do you think professionals feel empowered in that way because they are constantly developing?
I think now at the senior years of my career, I had 24 years as a maritime pilot after being at sea for the first 12 years of my life. I feel, and reflecting upon my experience, I do believe that we've still got a long way to go. Professional development in maritime pilotage is inconsistent at the moment at best in the UK because it's not mandatory. IMO lay a guidance, an A960 guidance for us to follow, and the states encourage the implementation, but it is not mandatory, and budgetary leverage and all those kind of factors come into play. And I do believe that it's our responsibility here as a training centre to map out that consistent pathway, so that a pilot, for example, can go from a junior pilot to a senior time pilot and learn all the way through more holistically than they do now.
From your perspective, it should be mandatory.
I think there's an element of there should be some mandatory training. I say some parts of the world, their license is related to a mandatory technical training as laid out by IMO in the A960. But here in the UK, it is not mandatory. It is dependent on each association or pilot or port authority to budget and put their pilots through the necessary training. I know in the district that I was, no names, no pack drill, CPD was absent throughout my 24 years. I've learned probably more now in the 2 years I've been here in terms of the more holistic part of the industry than I did in those 24 years. It was all situated learning. Yeah.
So we are seeing a change, but we need to maybe see more. And in terms of those key players in the industry, the UK is one of them. How pivotal is it that we try and lead the way with tackling things like climate change?
Well, with the UK, even though we like to puff our chest out and think we've got two things. One is history. We're an island economy. We have a maritime history. We're still probably the centre of maritime law, insurance, and other parts, research and education. We're still classed as world leading. It is our responsibility to lead as a maritime nation with history, and be the first to and step up in investing in green technology, alternative fuels. Shipbuilding is something that is less so in this country now, unfortunately, but we've still got some fantastic specialists, engineers, architects that can really be at the forefront of the technology.
So with that in mind then, is this actually a really exciting time for innovation potentially?
I think every time you get challenges, whether it's regulatory compliance or environmental concerns, there is a fantastic opportunity for innovation now. Is to sometimes we all need targets, but the target to 2050 and what the consumer is more aware now is driving innovation, and very much so. But we need to educate, we need to train, and we want to train people from a younger professional into a more modern, holistic, environmentally aware industry.
And would you say, in terms of retaining, recruiting talented seafarers, that kind of job and career and lifestyle, do you think it's as popular as it used to be, or has that changed in the time you've spent in the industry?
Well, it's very much changed. I mean, when I came and joined as a cadet, all I would do is I would look up through the hierarchy on a ship, and think, well, I'm going to end up being the captain, and that could take a number of years, or you could go into pilotage. I think it has changed, and I think it should do, because now you need to give the young people coming out of school and colleges a career pathway, a pathway through, and it might not always be on a ship. It might be from ship to shore, from deck to boardroom. You've got to always give a career pathway. As a pilot, you train and you're authorised in that district, and then suddenly you're a pilot for 20 years. I still think in that industry there should be a career CPD pathway right up through to retirement. I talk that from experience more than anything, but in our industry, it's about that pathway from also ship to ship, but ship to shore as well.
Yeah. As always on Explained, we like to end with a look ahead. And so I'd like to ask you, will we be able, big question really, but will we be able to meet the climate crisis to ensure sustainability of our oceans? Can the industry be proactive and step up and be able to ensure its sustainability and, find that resilience?
I think the answer is yes, but there are lots of challenges as to what pace that will be at. The world leaders have got a big part to play. I think you find now in this era now, some of the world leadership with climate change is going to be a challenge, and that's going to affect the progress. But I do believe that the industry is very forward-thinking. In terms of IMO and some of these regional bodies and what they do in regulatory and compliance, we have to move to that. But there's going to be some challenges, and as I said before, it needs the whole chain to work together to achieve it.
Absolutely. And what do you want to see happen in the industry in the years to come, from your perspective?
Well, I relate things now to professional development and training, and unfortunately, in the position that I'm in, I can influence that, and that's what my goal is. My goal is to make it more consistent, more holistic approach to professional development, and also to recruit and to retain professionals, and not to lose the skill sets of the seafarer. How we do that, I have ideas, and I look forward to the near future to being able to shape the future.
Awesome. That's a great note to finish on. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and once again, Timsbury Lake, a wonderful place. And thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Big thanks to Martin for joining us on this week's episode of Explained, and thank you, listener, for tuning in. Like what you heard today? Let us know. You can find us online at solent.ac.uk, as well as on all your favourite podcasts and social media platforms. Leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode, and be the first to hear the next episode by hitting that subscribe button. Thank you, and see you soon.